welcome or welcome back to my channel, The Infinite Library. So, August was quite a busy month for me in terms of reading, mostly thanks to a readathon that I was a part of. I kind of was doing book roasts, Magical Readathon, links down in the description below for her. It's a really fun readathon where essentially you are a student in a magical institution and you pick a job calling. And as part of that calling, you have to read specific books for certain subjects. And basically, to kind of complete your job class, you have to read enough books in this subject, and then you are qualified as like a certain magical class. So I essentially kind of use one of my D&D characters for this. I play as Elspeth, who is, in my D&D games at least, she's a tiefling warlock. But for Magical Readathon, I've made her a earthling. It's basically the same in terms of personality. She's a very like kooky kind of cinnamon roll kind of character. And her chosen calling is Feywild Cartographer. Because originally when she was a warlock in my game, she was a Feylock. With a pact essentially with like this great tree fae. So as part of that, I've been able to kind of read like with a challenge this month, which has been really fun, and also made me read a lot more. So without further ado, let's do the wrap up for August. So, in the month of August, I managed to read 12 books, which I believe, looking at my stats for the past year, is probably the most books I've read all year in 1 month. I think I managed 11 last month, and in June and in April, when it was the first equinox for the Magical Readathon. But it's definitely been one of my biggest reading months, and partly because I've kind of been reading very widely in terms of what I've read. I've not just read big novels, although there are certainly some big novels that I did read, but I've also kind of read some manga, I've read some novellas, to kind of hit some of those prompts, and overall I really enjoyed it. Like, I didn't feel like I was struggling, which was nice, and I shockingly had some of the best books I've read all year in this month. So it was a really good month for me reading wise. So I read 12 books, which overall was a total of 3,887 pages. In terms of the format I read 9 physically and 3 digitally. So 3 of those were ebooks. And the rest were physical copies. I do prefer to read physically, but I have an e-reader that I will use occasionally, usually for reading sort of things that I can't easily get my hands on, such as manga. My library unfortunately doesn't stock a lot of manga, so unless like I just buy a lot of manga, which can get quite expensive, I do tend to sort of trial read a lot of series online before I will then sort of make the purchase for them, because they're shorter books, I get through them really fast. So if I was just buying everything I was interested in, I wouldn't be able to buy any other books basically, and I just have way too much manga. So of those books, the genres I read this month, it's definitely not been this year yet. The genres I read this month, I read 6 fantasy, 2 manga, 1 graphic novel, 5 sci-fi, which is quite impressive for me. I'm usually I still am more fantasy than sci-fi, but I managed to read a lot of sci-fi this month. 2 thrillers, and 6 of those were LGBTQ+, of the 12 books total that I read. So just for a further breakdown in terms of stats, star rating wise, I had a pretty good month. I actually had 3 5 stars this month. I've not had any 5 stars in ages either, so it was lovely to find like 3 books that have just become 3 of my favourite books. in 1 month. So that was great. It was a very successful month for me. I had 3 4-star books, 4 3-star books, and 2 2-star books. So unfortunately 2 books really did not work for me. But thankfully, I think looking at which ones were the 2 stars, they were both quite short ones, which I'm quite relieved about. I think both of them are manga, actually. So I had a lot of misses this month in terms of manga, which is a shame, but hopefully I'll be reading some better manga in the coming months. With those ratings, I have an average of the month of a rating of 3.6, which is pretty good. That's like, you know, almost a 4-star, and that's decent for a month where I feel like most of the time, a lot of like my months, I'll be somewhere between mostly 3 and 4 stars. I've definitely had months where I've had no 5-star reads, and I've had months where I've only had 3 stars. So yeah, it was a pretty good reading month for me. In terms of where I got these books from, 3 of these I took out from the library. During this wrap up, I don't have physical copies of those, unfortunately, because most of those were popular books that had reserves on them. So I don't have them anymore, so I'll just kind of put a little graphic up here for those ones. So 3 from the library, 3 of them were ebooks, and the remaining 6 were all books that were on my TBR originally. I think I only bought two books specifically in August. No, that's a lie. I bought 3 books. And I'll tell you a bit more about those books that I bought when I do the wrap-up stats in a minute and why I ended up buying them this month rather than just taking from my TBR. So without further ado, let's go through the books that I read, and I'll go through these in the order that I read them. So I started off the month with the sapphic fantasy book called These Witches Don't Burn by Isabel Sterling. This was a really fun book for me. I kind of went into it with a little bit of trepidation, but it was the start of the month and I kind of wanted something that was like a light read. And this is kind of like a YA high school fantasy about witches, basically. And honestly, I really liked it. You know, I didn't go in expecting it to be amazing. I actually had a lot of books to do with witches this month, which is really funny. And I was expecting another book, which was going to be like my big, more serious, big witch book. And all I wanted for this was like fun, light vibes. You know, I've been kind of doing a rewatch of Charmed right now on How to Train Your Gavin's channel. And I just kind of wanted those vibes. I wanted something sweet, something cute, something that was kind of The Craft, but with sapphic vibes, and I got that with this. So, just to give you a little rundown about what this is about a girl called Hannah, who lives in Salem, and she is part of a coven, where she kind of does elemental magic. So this is Hannah here, I believe. And I love the cover for this. Can I just say, like, this is such a good cover. Like, and it just kind of details the 4 main girls in the series. So along with Hannah, there is another girl called Veronica, who is her ex. They're both witches, they're both in the same coven, so she's kind of stuck with having to engage with Veronica, even though they broke up already. And then she also has a friend, whose name I've forgotten now, unfortunately. Let me go have a look. Wow, I've really forgotten her name. Oh, Gemma. There we go. So she's a friend called Gemma who is not a witch, who is totally unaware of all the magical stuff. And then in the book, she meets another girl called Morgan, who kind of like the new girl into town. And in the book, essentially, there appears to be kind of like someone after the witches in the town. And it's kind of a mystery of working out who is sort of after witches, who is causing bad magic in town, and trying to stop them before someone gets hurt. And like the mystery wasn't amazing or anything. I didn't quite see who it was. I kind of had an inkling, but I didn't hate it at all when we did get the reveal. And generally, yeah, I had a good time with this. It was a low to mid 4-star for me. Like, I don't think it was amazing, but I just really enjoyed the characters. I had a good time with it. And I picked up the second book, which is called This Coming Won't Break, pretty much straight away because I just want to get back to them while all the characters are kind of fresh in my head. So yeah, that was a win for me, which was really nice. The second book I read, unfortunately, was not a win for me, and that was a manga I picked up called My Secret Affection by Fumi Mikami. So I essentially, I did a 3 for 2 offer in Forbidden Planet, and I picked my other 2 books, and then I was looking for my third book, and I kind of drifted over to the shoujo section. I'm not always a big fan of romance shoujo, but I'd seen another series by this author. I think it's called A Sign of Affection, and it's been getting a lot of hype, and I love the art. The art is absolutely gorgeous in this. I love the colour kind of composition that's used for a lot of it as well. And I'd heard a lot of good things about this other series, and I couldn't find that series when I was there, so I thought I'd pick up this other series. I think this is maybe only 2 volumes, but it just wasn't for me, unfortunately. I found it just didn't gel with me. I had some issues with the characters, with the plot line, to be honest. Essentially, it kind of pretends it's an LGBT book, and it's kind of not. It basically does a turn the tables of what if the whole world was gay, and that was the norm, everyone was homosexual. And the main girl, whose name is Kazusa, she is kind of dating a girl, and they break up at the start of the book. And then she realizes throughout the book that she has feelings for her childhood friend, who is a boy. So she's kind of grappling with these feelings of oh my god, I like a boy, I'm a heterosexual. And it's kind of this big unspoken taboo thing to be a heterosexual. And I kind of get what the author was going for. I don't know if it was supposed to be a commentary on this is what it is when you're gay, and the whole world thinks you're supposed to be this way, and you're feeling feelings that, no one else understands, and it's hard trying to find someone that feels the same way. So I get that was maybe their intent, but for me it just didn't work. The main girl, she's cute, but she is literally that trope of that clumsy girl is supposed to be, she's sweet and nice and all that, and there's all these situations that happen very conveniently where she's literally just falling onto the boy so many times. Again, he's the trope of the cool guy that everyone likes, and their friendship is nice, but again, it just didn't gel with me. So it's a shame, because it has some absolutely gorgeous artwork. I love the art style a lot, and I would maybe check out the other series as well, just to see if I like it more. I believe the other series is about a girl who is deaf, and the boy's learning sign language or something like that. But yeah, unfortunately, this one just didn't work for me. It just kind of left a bad taste in my mouth, essentially, because it just didn't really work. And it kind of was marketing itself to be a very different sort of shoujo with the premise. And honestly, it was very much, the storyline was very much just your typical shoujo. So unfortunately, that was a miss for me. So the third book I read this month was a novella, actually, and it was the first book in the Murderbot series, All Systems Red by Martha Wells. So I really enjoyed this one, actually. This was a 4-star for me. I kind of went into it because I knew it was going to be an easy read, and it's something I've been wanting to get around to for a while now. I actually recently got their new fantasy book, The Witch King, but I've heard a lot about this series, and I kind of have been wanting to check it out. So I figured it was a good time of day to check it out. And yeah, I really liked this one. I enjoyed the world building. I thought the main character, the Murderbot, was really funny. I just had a good time with it. It wasn't anything that I think really stuck with me, but I enjoyed it, and that's all I've really got to say about it, to be honest, at the moment, because it's kind of a short book. It's just a little self-contained kind of space mission that's going on, and it's basically about this character who is the Murderbot. And they are kind of assigned as being kind of a bodyguard, I suppose, for the space crew. And then the space crew kind of find that they're in a danger zone, and it turns out that there's something more going on than what they're being led to believe, and they get embroiled in this conflict. And the Murderbot is is a very funny character because despite the name, they are literally just like this robot who has hacked themselves out of like their governance system, so they can't be like told what to do anymore, but they're still kind of choosing to play along, because I think it's because by that way, like, they still have access to things, and they just kind of want to sit back and like watch all their TV shows that they now have access to, and they're just enjoying that. And it's just really funny that, you know, that they're kind of like, they're supposed to be this like big killing machine and they just want to catch up on the latest soap opera, basically. I found that really fun, and it was interesting kind of like seeing interactions with the other crew members. Like, they have a lot of like almost social anxiety, I want to say, where they feel very conscious about how they can't relate to the people around them. Because they're a robot. Yeah, there was some interesting things looked at in it. And I say, like, the story didn't blow me away or anything, but it was just a good time. And I definitely want to check out the next in the series to see kind of what happens next, because I know it's got a couple of books in the series, and with the ending, I really want to see where this goes, because I feel like this could really kind of, it's felt very much like an intro to the world, to the character, and I feel like there's going to be sort of like more exciting things to come. So the next book I read was one of the more chunky ones, and it was the very hyped up book of the season, Fourth Wing by Rekha Yaros. I actually took this out from the library originally. I've been waiting like a little while. I basically put a reserve on for it not long after it came out, after I saw how hyped it was getting, and I was kind of not really sure if I was going to like this or not. I'd heard conflicting things. I'd heard some people loving it, and then I'd heard some people hating it. And I didn't really know much about. I deliberately tried not to sort of find out a lot about it. So all I knew was that it was about dragons and a dragon riding, and that there was a lot of romance. And I'm not always big on romance, so I kind of felt it was going to be like a hit or a miss for me. I was kind of expecting it to be a miss, honestly. But my reserve came in just in time for this month, so I was like, right, let's see what all the fuss is about. So I got halfway through, and then I had to go and buy my own copy because I ended up enjoying this so much more than I thought I was going to. This was my first 5-star of the month. And like, I can't say this is like a brilliantly written book. It's certainly objectively not the best book ever out there, but I just had so much fun with it. Like, you know, I echo what Jess Owens says with this, in that I just ate it up. You know, I just had like I had just kind of good time. And I went into it like kind of not really expecting much from it. And I had a ball, you know. I really enjoyed our main character. I enjoyed all the shenanigans she got up to. I really liked her interactions with the romantic love interest in there. I'm glad it wasn't a triangle, because I was expecting it to go down that route, and thankfully it did not. And I think most of all, like, I love the dragons. You know, it's been a while since I've read a dragon book. And I like dragons, but they're not like my favourite magical creature or anything. But I kind of forgot how great they are. And this book really reminded me of that. Like, I loved the 2 dragons that are like the main dragons in this book so much. I loved their interactions. I loved what they could do. I loved how they sort of looked after the main character. And overall, yeah, I really loved this. I didn't expect to at all. It was my surprise of the month. But yeah, I'm excited for the next book in the series. It's definitely one I can see myself rereading. And yeah, I guess what I can say is that for me, at least, it certainly wouldn't for everybody, but for me, it lived up to the hype. So the next book I read was a library book that I don't have a physical copy of, so I'm just going to put a little graphic here for it. And that was The Family Game by Catherine Sedman. So it is a thriller. And it's been likened a lot to this horror film called Ready or Not, which I'd heard a lot about. I hadn't actually watched it. And I read this book, and then I automatically went and watched the film. I enjoyed the film more, sadly. I didn't hate this book. I had a good time with it. It kind of like a solid 3-star read for me. I've been reading a few more thrillers recently, and a lot of them are a miss for me, unfortunately. Like, I kind of want to enjoy thrillers, and a lot of the time, like, I like them when they get really weird. So I love The Writing Retreat, for example, but a lot of like thrillers I just kind of don't gel with. I get a bit bored. Yeah, like the kind of like the ones that are more dramas and stuff, I don't always enjoy this one. So I did have a good time with this one. So I actually read this one early for Books and Lala's Literary Dead Book Club. I believe it is their pick for October, I think. But I kind of ordered it from the library in advance. And it came in a lot sooner than I thought, and then it automatically had reserves because it's really popular and it's quite a new book. It came out last year, so I just had to read it and give it back straight away, basically. But I had a good time with it. Like, basically, it is about this author called Harry, and she has just got engaged, and because she's just got engaged, she's now finally meeting the family of the man that she's going to marry. And this man is like, you know, the love of her life. He's perfect for her, she thinks. But his family are weird, basically, and they have this thing where they like to play games at their family events, and these games get strange and they get dangerous, and the father of her fiance basically like takes this like weird interest in her, and he kind of gives her this recording saying that, oh, I've written this book, I'd like you to take a look at it, essentially, you know, as a novelist who's doing well right now. And when she starts listening to this, she finds out it is a confession to dark things that have happened in the past. And yeah, it was very twisty. I really enjoyed the characters in this one. I think I found the ending to be odd. I don't know how I felt about the ending. Like, I didn't hate the end reveal of like sort of who the real bad person was, but I just got weird vibes, honestly. Like, I didn't understand why at the end Harry chose to stay with certain people. I don't want to do any spoilers, but yeah, it just basically there were some characters that were kind of too odd for me. The father was really creepy. There was this weird kind of sexual tension going on between him and Harry, which was just really gross. And yeah, so I enjoyed the concept. I enjoyed like the main kind of plot parts of the story, but I did not like the ending. So yeah, if I had to choose between this book and then the movie that I watched afterwards, Ready or Not, I would very much go for Ready or Not, which was a very good movie. I enjoyed it so much. So yeah, that was The Family Game. I then read what was going to be my next 5-star of the month, which is Juno Dawson's The Shadow Cabinet. I picked this up from Queerlit, who very kindly put aside one of their signed copy versions, so I was really happy to get that. And I read the first book for this series, which is called Her Majesty's Secret Coven. Last year, I think. I read it for the book club that I run, and I really enjoyed it. Like, this is essentially The Craft, but if they grew up in Britain and now they're all adults having to sort of get by and have jobs and that kind of thing. And it's such a good time. Like, it's so witty. It deals with such important issues. I love the diversity of the characters. And this book in particular, I'm not really going to go into that much because there's a huge twist that happens at the end of the first book and it impacts on the rest of this book. I really can't go into it in great detail. The original series essentially is set up that it is this group of women who all were kind of like a sisterhood coven when they were younger. And then they grew up, they all kind of spread out and they're not really great friends anymore. But circumstances happen where they kind of are having to interact with each other again. And for some that is good, for some that is bad. And it kind of shifts a lot between different viewpoints and each of the women are really different from one another. So we have Elle, who's kind of like a stay-at-home mom and a nurse. We have Neve, who is a vet. She's kind of like one of the most focal characters in the first book. We have Helen, who is like a politician essentially within this kind of like HMRC, which is Her Majesty's Secret Coven. And a lot of this book is set in Manchester, which I really enjoy because I'm from Manchester. So I get to see some kind of like really fun little things here and there that I'm like, oh, I know that area. Basically, if you want to read like a really well-developed, witty, urban fantasy, I guess, set in like, you know, modern day Manchester, but an AU where magic is real, but no one is aware. It's like this big secret. Yeah, I would very much recommend this. All of Juno Bawson's books I've read so far have been great. I really love some of the things they've written. So that was a big win for me this month. The next book I read was actually a buddy read that I did with somebody for Magical Readathon, and it was The Only One Left by Riley Sager. I'm going to put a little graphic here because, again, it was a library book and it was very hotly anticipated and wanted by many people, so I had to read it quite fast and give it back. Thankfully, my buddy was also happy to read it quite fast, despite the fact that she was moving house at the time. But she was great, and it made it a better experience for me to buddy read it, I think, because I didn't massively enjoy it. I think like she really loved it. I think she gave it a 4 or a 5 star. But it was a 3-star for me. I probably, of the 2 thrillers I read this month, I liked Family Game more. And then The Only One Left was just kind of okay. So essentially it is set in the 80s, I believe. And it is kind of like, it's a more gothic sort of mystery. And it is about she's kind of like, she's been disgraced, the main character. And she is kind of like a live-in nurse a lot of the time for people, like a carer. And she gets sent to this mansion on the edge of town, which is infamous because the old lady who lived in the mansion, all of her family died when she was really young, and she was the only survivor, the only one left. And basically everyone thinks that she is the killer. She is the one that killed all of her family, and that essentially, you know, a murderess is living on the edge of town. And our main character is going to have to now look after her. So it's kind of like, it plays off as like, you know, a very gothic sort of tale. The two start interacting via typewriter. The old lady, she is kind of like starting to tell the main character her story. But it's kind of like, you can kind of tell that things aren't right. You don't really know what to believe. And the whole book ends up kind of like being this mystery of what really happened, and also a mystery around the previous person who was caring for the old lady who vanished, which is why our main character is now kind of looking after her. So it certainly wasn't a bad book. Like, I think it was well enough written. But I just kind of got a little bored of it. I was also, because I was buddy reading it, I wasn't reading it all in one go. I was sort of reading it in fits and starts whilst I was reading other books. And I think for me, it probably would have been better if I had just read it like all in one go without any interruptions. So I didn't hate it, but it just wasn't for me. I've heard really good things about Riley Sager, and I probably would try another book of theirs, but this one was a miss for me, unfortunately. So the next book I read was also another miss, and it was my other manga for the month, and it's a very old manga series. I believe it's from like the 90s, so it's kind of got that, you know, 90s shoujo aesthetic. I read the first volume of Please Save My Earth, which is a sci-fi, it's like kind of sci-fi, kind of fantasy, kind of everyday life kind of story, essentially. And it is about this girl who, her and some of the other people in her school are having these like weird dreams where they are kind of seeing themselves as completely different people, who are like living in the future and having this like very interconnected life where they're all scientists and something big is happening. But meanwhile, she's just kind of like this schoolgirl who's just moved to this new place. She's trying to adapt, she's struggling to fit in, and the book is also along the side like of this whole sci-fi storyline about her trying to connect to other people and these 2 boys who she meets who kind of help her with settling in, essentially. There's also a big subplot where this like little boy who she babysits is playing all these horrible pranks on her, and then a bad thing happens, and then it just gets really weird from that point. Like, I couldn't quite work out what was going on. I didn't really love the plot line, and I just felt it was a little bit confusing. Like, it felt like it was trying to say too many things in the first book, and it probably could have taken a bit longer to do it. Yeah, like, the characters were kind of okay, but and the art was also just sort of okay. It wasn't amazing or anything, but it was very kind of old school shoujo kind of artwork. I just ultimately didn't really connect with it. Like, I just found it a little bit confusing, and I just didn't really know where it was going or what it was trying to do. So I know it's an old series. It's quite a well acclaimed series from what I know. So it might be one that I come back to in the future when I'm feeling more in the mood of kind of reading something that maybe is a bit more, you've got to work for it. But at the moment, I just wasn't really feeling it, so that's not one I'm gonna like carry on reading at this moment in time. Thankfully, right after I read that, I got my last 5-star of the month, so it got better from that time. That was Divine Rivals by Rebecca Ross. I loved this book so much. This was I loved Fourth Wing, but this was my favourite one of the month in terms of how much it hit me emotionally. So this book is about two journalists. One of them is called Iris and the other is called Roman. And it's kind of set in this like alternate universe, like early, like around First, Second World War kind of thing, I suppose. It's kind of how it seems, but it's like a celestial war in this case, where soldiers are being called by gods to basically fight each other, and it's just like a war of the gods. And these two characters are they're both journalists, and they both are reporting on the war effort. And they initially have this kind of rivalry, but then essentially they kind of form a more unusual connection. And there's a lot about like writing letters to people. It's a very introspective book, to be honest, in terms of the characters. And I just loved it. I also wasn't expecting this to not be a standalone. It very much reads as a standalone book, and then right at the end, it puts in a twist, and you realise that, oh no, this is carrying on. Which I was both a little sad about and happy about, because I kind of was happy for this to be a standalone, but then the twist happened, and I was like, no, it cannot leave this here. I'm very glad we're getting another book out for this. I believe it is only going to be a duology. Basically, it talks a lot about writing. It talks a lot about living in a war, honestly. It got very dark, particularly once it did transfer over to the war parts. But yeah, I just really loved it, and I highly, highly recommend it. If you want something that's not like... It's got romance, which is quite a big part of it, but I also think like despite like at least for the first half, I felt it was a very cozy kind of read, and then it hit hard with the feels. So yeah, if that's the kind of book you're looking for, then I really recommend this one. The next book I read was another chunky one, and it was a sci-fi, and this was actually the book that we picked for my LGBT book club this month, and it is Persephone Station by Stina Licht. This was just kind of okay for me. I feel like a lot of us were just kind of like drawn in by the absolutely gorgeous cover and the premise, but it was just kind of alright. It was a 3-star for me, and I would probably pick up the other book in the universe by this author, but I had some issues with it, basically. I think we all had some issues with it. We had the book club meeting for this last week, and I think half of the group kind of felt the same as me, in that they were like, it was fine, and then the rest of the group hated it. And I think part of it is that the plotline just has issues. So it's got this really cool world set up, initially set in this kind of like urban city on this planet called Persephone Station. It's a lot of like crime bosses, and our main character is Angel, who is an ex-marine, and now they're kind of like the leader of this like group of like weird little mercenaries who have a spaceship. And she kind of gets involved in this task that one of the crime bosses, Rosie, asks her to do. And in that, she is basically going to have to look after this like indigenous species that live hidden in this world, and protect them from these like people who are trying to sort of steal this very important technology from them. And I liked the characters probably the most in this book. I did like the world building a lot, but I just felt the plot was where it had issues. Like, a lot of people found this to be really slow. It took a while to get going, and there was a lot of like in-depth stuff happening. And then the ending just felt very anticlimactic for me. Like, I kind of wished that the main antagonist had come in a lot sooner so we could kind of understand the impact of their motivations. And it just came in very last minute. There was like 3 different plot lines that we mostly saw in this book, and I feel like we could have dropped one of them easily because we were mostly with Rosie. Not with Rosie, we were mostly with Angel. And we'd occasionally switch to Rosie and to this other character called Kennedy's point of view. And the issue is that we didn't spend enough time with Kennedy or Rosie to really feel for them. So, like, we kind of got what was going on in Kennedy's head, and I did like that. I thought it was interesting, but Rosie, to me, like, they were such an interesting character, and I just could not get into their head. Like, there just didn't seem to be enough to really draw me to them, and they were such, like, an interesting sort of key character for the first part of this book, and then they just kind of fell into the background and just became a plot device for the last half, which was a shame. So it's a hard one for me to recommend. I don't really know what the audience is for this. Like, it has some great found family stuff. It has some great representation. Pretty much every single character in this book it goes into sort of like non-binary people and, you know, people of all different sexualities and that kind of thing. So it's got some great representation, but I just didn't really love the plot, unfortunately. So it was a bit of a miss in that point. So the second to last book I read in this month was The 3 O'Clock Dragon by John Wiswell. This was actually just a very short story, essentially, that was put on Tor. They've been kind of releasing like a bunch of these like little short stories recently, and I needed like something dragonish to like fulfill a prompt for Magical Readathon, and my original plan was to read one of the Temeraire books, and I just did not have time to do that, to like fulfill the deadline I needed. And then someone just said, oh, this has just been published on Tor, so check it out. And it was really fun. Like, it was not like anything amazing for me personally, but I think I rated it a 3-star. But it is basically just about this like dragon who is kind of a train, and they are like just kind of going around the city and like burning everything because they're a dragon, but then people sort of start hitching rides on them, and then they get involved in politics. It was just really funny. Like, I could see it just kind of being made into like a little animated short or something. It had a lot of charm and a lot of humour, and, you know, for like, it was probably just a half-hour cute read. But yeah, it was sweet. I had a good time with it. So, you know, if you want something, you know, short, dragonish, and free, go check that out on Tor. And then the final book I read this month was my graphic novel. And this was one I'd been anticipating reading for a long time. This is Across a Field of Starlight by Blue Delaquanti. I really liked this one. This was a 4-star. Like, I feel like I've been trying to read a lot of like LGBT graphic novels in the past like year or so, and I've not loved a lot of them. Like, I read Bloom and I had issues with the main character. This one caught my eye though because the cover design alone caught my eye, honestly. I just think it's gorgeous. But it is essentially about these like 2 non-binary teenagers who end up meeting in like weird circumstances when one of them lands on their planet, and then they get separated. But they can keep communicating with one another across the galaxy. I just really enjoyed it. Like, there was a lot of heavy stuff going on. Like, essentially one of the teenagers, Fasten, they are kind of like, their whole like planet that they are involved in is like very military, and they are trying to fight against this like, you know, big evil force that's kind of trying to kill everybody. And they are sort of training to be a soldier for a lot of it. Whereas Lou, who is kind of a bit more on the periphery, they're just kind of leading this like very carefree, almost peaceful life in like a different area of the galaxy where they're just kind of exploring and investigating things, and they live in this wonderful community. And it's just the shared connection between these 2 characters was just beautiful. think it's only a single book. Like, it kind of ends in a way that makes it be like, I feel like it could carry on if it wanted to, but it does also feel like it could be complete with this. And yeah, like, it's got some really great character designs in this. I really appreciated just the amount of diversity in this book. We have non-binary people. One of the key main characters, a female sergeant who has a beard. There's a lot to do with people's viewpoints and people's values, because for quite a while it seems like Lou just can't understand where Fasten is coming from. And they kind of like have conflict because of that, where they just don't really understand each other. It was just really interesting. Like, the interaction was lovely to see. There was some really cool world building. The sci-fi elements were very anime to me. Like, it gave me like Towards the Terror vibes. But yeah, I just really enjoyed it. And honestly, like, I would highly recommend it. Really well thought out, really nice art style. It's not anime, but I feel like it just works very well. It was a lot, it just gave me a lot to think about, I guess. So I went into it with very low expectations, but I was really glad that this one was a win for me. So yeah, that was my last book of the month. So that's pretty much it for the wrap up of August. I'm glad I managed to read so many good books. For September, I'm taking it a bit more relaxed. I haven't got any readathons going on. I'm basically kind of starting this channel at the moment, so I kind of want to focus on that, and I'm working on some projects that I want to do in the future. So some of my reading is going to be to do with that, but I'm also just kind of like working for a couple of books that I haven't been able to get to in a bit. So I'm not making any big TBR plans really for this month. I will definitely for other months. October for me is going to be the spooky reading month, so that is probably when I'm going to be making like a real TBR. But I have a couple of books that I am hoping to get to, so I'll just go over those very briefly now. So I have a few books that I do want to try and get to in the month of September. My main focus is trying to get through my pile of library books that I've kind of been sitting on my shelf for a while, and also just getting around to some sequels mostly. I just want to be more of a mood reader this month, I think. Like, I want to just take it easy and just see what I'm feeling like reading, rather than setting any challenges for myself. So one of the books I'm definitely going to be hopefully finishing in the next couple of days, because I'm already halfway through it, is How to Sell a Haunted House by Grady Hendrix. This is technically still part of my Magical Readathon, because I'm using this for a prompt where you get to summon a little impling. But it also has a reserve on it, unfortunately. So I have to finish this quite soon so I can get it back. But I've mostly enjoyed Grady Hendrix's books. I think I've read 3 books by them now, and I've loved 2 of them, which was My Best Friend's Exorcism, which was a 5-star for me. The Final Girl Support Group, which was a 4-star. Both of those were really good. I didn't really enjoy the Southern Book Club's guide to killing vampires. That was a bit of a miss for me, so I'm kind of going in hesitantly with Grady's books, just because I don't know if like it's gonna be another Southern Book Club essentially. But I'm halfway through this at the moment. Quite enjoying it so far. I'm glad that despite the horror being mostly centered around dolls, which is one of my phobias, it's not hitting me that bad in terms of the spook, but I'm just kind of enjoying the main character and what's going on. I don't like their brother at all in it so far, but I feel like there's going to be some more development with that and with their relationship. Basically, this is about this brother and the sister, and their parents die unexpectedly, and they are kind of left with the house, and the house is haunted. So yeah, it's kind of Grady's most recent book, I think. So yeah, I'm enjoying that at the moment, and that is going to be my first priority this month. Other books I'm intending to get to this month, I want to get to The Golden Enclaves by Naomi Novik. I read the first 2 books of this back in July. I just didn't have time to finish the series in August. So this is my other priority. 2 of my work colleagues have got into this series and finished it and are now itching for me to finish it so they can talk to me about it. So I'm definitely going to be getting to that this month. My other books then are mostly kind of books that have been borrowed to me by friends and library books. So I have 3 books I think that I need to pick up from the library next month. So I believe I have to pick up Page Boy by Elliot Page, which is their kind of memoir biography. I'm also picking up My Year of Rest and Relaxation, which is just a book I've been kind of intrigued by for a while. Yeah, a couple of books are coming in, and they're all kind of quite new popular books, so I'm expecting I'll have to read them quite fast. So I've got those. I've also got a couple of other books that I've had out from the library that I want to try and get to soon. So I've got Sayaka Murata's like short story collection, Life Ceremony. I've read 2 books by this author now and loved them both, so I'm really excited to see like their short stories. They do good weird fiction, so yeah, recommend if that's kind of up your alley. I also want to get to The Witchery by S. Isabel. I honestly know nothing about this. I just saw the cover in my library and I really liked it, and I was like, witches! And I'm apparently reading a lot of witch books right now. So I was like, sure, I'll pick it up. But this is basically about a town and a curse and witches. So basically it says, each year a curse holds the town of Halesford hostage, and with the curse comes death. The witches of Mess Mortis Coven Academy can protect the town, but Iris, Jayla and Thalia, powerful young witches, intend to stop the curse once and for all. When Logan, a young witch struggling with her powers, is taken under their wing, she is grateful, but the plan to end the curse brings out all dangers and the cost may be greater than anyone could have imagined. So I've no idea if this is going to be good or not. I've heard literally nothing about it, but I will read it and report back hopefully next month. My other library book I want to get to is a Stephen King from a, I am not going to be able to pronounce that, so from a Buick 8. I've been getting into Stephen King in the last couple of years. I've read a couple of his books, but I want to read more. And essentially at the start of this year, I did kind of like a call out to my friends to give me 12 books, 12 recommendations for 12 months. And this was my very good friend Emma's pick. Stephen King is her favourite author, and she'd recently just read this and really enjoyed it. So she recommended it to me to read. So I am pretty behind on my 12 books, 12 recs, and I found this in the library a few weeks back, so I'm gonna try and get this one knocked out this month. Other books that I'm probably gonna get around to, I want to read some manga. I have 2 volumes that a friend of mine lent me, which is Fangs. I have volume 1 and volume 2, and it is kind of like a gay vampire thing. And the art's really nice, and it's just really good from what I've heard from my friend. She raved about it. I don't know much about it other than it's gay and it's got vampires, which honestly is enough for me. So aiming to read these. I believe there is a 3rd volume coming out, but it's not out yet, so I'm just going to start with these. And I think that's it for like my solid plans. If I read anything else, then awesome, but I'm not really going to push myself. I'm kind of doing like a Higurashi read at the moment. I'm about 8 or 9 volumes into that, so I might try and pick up more of that, but that's it really for me, I think, for this month. I'm just going to be taking it a bit more relaxed, and I'm going to be working on some projects, as I said, so that are my aims for the month. Thankfully, I think I do have my LGBT book club. We'll be meeting at the end of the month, but we're reading In the Lies of Puppets by TJ Klune, which I read earlier this year. So I'm probably going to do a skim read and a reread of some of my favourite parts of that, but I'm probably not going to read the whole book again. Because I only read it about 3 months ago. So that's basically it right now. I guess this has been both my wrap up for August and my TBR for the next month. Yeah, let me know in the comments what you've been reading recently. Have you got any books that you're like really excited about coming out? Is there any books here in my TBR that you kind of like want to tell me to definitely get to this month? Please tell me. And I guess that's it for this video. Stay safe, stay cozy, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!